This show gives you an opportunity to connect with your elected officials and, of course, for them to connect with you. Welcome to Ward Updates 2022, a series of one-on-one interviews with Ottawa City Councillors and, of course, the Mayor. We're going to discuss a number of issues, a number of important issues during these discussions, issues that affect you, your family, your neighbours, and, of course, members of your community. My guest today is Glen Gower, City Councillor for Stittsville. Welcome, Glen. Wonderful to see you. Want to start off by just asking you on a personal basis, Glen, how are things been for you and your family over the last 22 months so far?
Well, it's certainly been an unusual 22 months, but I think overall doing well. I'm glad to have some snow on the ground so I can get out and do some cross-country skiing in the community. Over the Amberwood Golf Course is one of my favorite spots. So enjoying the outdoor weather when you can. Yeah.
Well, and I saw that on your website that you were like, finally, we've got some significant snow here and I can get out and enjoy some activities in Amberwood. By the way, that's a great golf course, one that I've been at many times with family members. And you're in just a wonderful area there. And we're going to talk a little bit about, of course, Stittsville and some of the development that's going on there as well, Glen. But let's talk about how we talked about how it's affected you personally, the pandemic, but how has it affected your role as a city councillor?
Well, it's really changed the role. I often talk about how, as a councillor, I feel like I have two jobs right now. The first job is looking after all the things we normally look after as a city councillor, right? The snow plowing and the street clearing and the parks and recreation. And then we have an entire second job on top of that, which is helping people navigate their way through this pandemic. At the very beginning, it was understanding the restrictions, and then we moved on to how to access testing, and then we got to vaccines. And of course, with the opening and the closing and the opening and the closing, helping businesses and individuals navigate what they need to do. So for me and my team, it's really been almost like a whole extra job on top of what we usually do in our councillor role.
Obviously, I imagine too, Glen, it's made it more difficult for you to communicate with your constituents. How have you had to change the way you communicate with them?
Well, you're right, because we miss all those opportunities to be out in the community, right? The school picnics, the community barbecues, community meetings in person, but I think we found some new ways and sometimes some better ways to communicate as well. We're doing all of our public meetings online via Zoom, and we're able to not only reach more people than we normally would. It's more accessible, but we can also put archives up on the internet, so on YouTube or on Facebook, so people have an opportunity to go back and rewatch those videos if they weren't able to attend. And of course, we have our email newsletter. We have 6,000 subscribers now through the email newsletter. And somewhere in the middle of the pandemic, I started doing a weekly update every Saturday morning, about a 10-minute video update that goes on Facebook, on YouTube, and on podcast platforms. So that's just another way we've been experimenting with different ways. When you don't have those natural ways to reach people, you really have to experiment and try new things to make sure that you're able to hear from people and be able to share the information.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. Here we are doing this from my home, right? Where normally you and I would probably, be sitting, across from each other in the studios at Rogers TV. This has had a huge impact on everyone, and we've seen the community come together. I wonder, Glen, if there's perhaps a story you could share for us where you saw in your particular ward the community really come together.
Well, we've seen it throughout the pandemic. I mean, I remember very early on, there were volunteers getting together to sew and fabricate masks for people who needed them. There have been people who've done fundraisers. Think of the Turcotte family. For two Christmases in a row, they've decorated their home. It was National Lampoon's Vacation theme one year. It was Home Alone this year, and they've raised tens of thousands of dollars for a local charity. One of my favorite things was last fall, not directly related to the pandemic, but there was an older couple who reached out to us and they needed some help raking leaves on their very large property. And we put the word out to volunteers, and we had, I think, about 25 or 30 people who came out. So many hands makes for light work. In about 30 minutes, we had their yard cleared up. And actually, we've been building on that. Just, I guess 2 weeks ago, we launched a new thing called Stittsville Volunteer Connect. So if you go to glengower.ca/volunteers, you can sign up to a new email list that we set up. And whenever we hear about volunteer opportunities in the community, we send out an alert to the people who signed up. And just in 2 weeks, we've had over 100 people put their names in to just say we want to help out when there's an opportunity. So that's great news. And we've always seen a lot of volunteers in the community. I think the pandemic has really reminded everybody how important it is to get involved and to help out your fellow neighbor.
Councillor Gower, for this term, as this term winds down and we close in on October 24th, the next municipal election, what are some of your goals as this term winds down for your particular ward?
Well, one of the big goals that I had coming into this was really to kickstart some healthier development, some revitalization along Stittsville Main Street. And we've had a lot of positive things happen over the last few years. What I'm really excited about is next month we're going to be releasing a draft of what's called the Stittsville Main Street Public Realm Plan. So for people who've been interested in adding better bike infrastructure or sidewalk infrastructure. We have got some ideas on how we can reconfigure the street to do that. For people who've been saying we'd like some nicer, some lamp posts or some better street furniture, benches and so on. This is part of what this plan is capturing. And we're also pursuing a number of grants from other levels of government and some funding from the city in order to get these up and running and off the ground as soon as we can. So Stittsville Main Street is one of the big things that I'm excited about. And there's some good news coming up. But in the next month or so, we're going to have a big public meeting, publish these plans online for people to comment on and share their feedback. And just one of the many things we've done along Stittsville Main Street. The other big one is a big road project, a transportation project in the community, which is Robert Grant Avenue. We want to get Robert Grant Avenue built. It's the most important transportation piece of transportation infrastructure in our community. It's a road, it's bike paths, it's sidewalks, a future transit route. And we're hoping to have some very good news. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag too early, but hoping to have some very good news to share about construction within the next few weeks. So looking forward to that one. And then working with our provincial partners on schools. That was something I heard loud and clear when I was knocking on doors 4 years ago now, was the need for more schools in our community. Now, strictly speaking, that's a provincial responsibility. It's the province that funds that. But there's a lot that the city needs to do in terms of planning and approvals. And if you drive down Robert Grant Avenue and Cope Drive, you'll see the public high school is very well underway. And there are 3 or 4 other school sites that are in various stages of progress. So in the next couple of years, we're probably going to see, I think it's 4 new schools opening in the Stittsville community. And that's really a partnership between the school board, between the provincial government, between the city as well. So really excited for the community on that happening soon.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, the community itself must be so encouraged to see this happening, especially because, there's a tremendous amount of development happening in Stittsville. And when I think of that, does that development fit into this new master plan, right, that we're talking about, that 15-minute neighborhood? A lot of these developments that are going on right now and that will be coming up, will they fit into that master plan, Glenn?
Yeah, very much. I mean, it's something we've been looking at for the past few years. How do we do development better? It's not possible to stop development in Ottawa. In fact, development's happening because we have such a great economy and a great standard of living and quality of life. People want to move here because there are jobs here for their families, and it's a great place to live. But we got to make sure as we continue to grow that it remains a great place to live, that we don't lose any of that quality of life. So this is part of what the city's been working on through the official plan that you mentioned, but also in any of the developments. How do we make this a nicer community to work in? And recognizing too, one of the challenges there is this city being able to catch up on building many of the amenities. I mentioned Robert Grant Avenue, the road, but also recreation facilities, parks, libraries, police and fire stations. With all these new people moving in, we have to make sure that we have the city facilities to support them. And I totally get the frustration people have around some of the change they're seeing. We are growing very quickly, and every new family means more competition for that spot at the weekly swimming lessons. It means another person on a crowded bus. So we really have to be cognizant of that and making sure that we're making the right investments as a city in order to support that growth.
Well, and I imagine, Councillor Gower, in your area too, there's a careful balance, right? Because people move into that area because of a specific lifestyle. They're looking for a different lifestyle out there. But you also mentioned, the amount of growth. So, there's going to be some balance between people that are, looking to get away from it all, of course. And then you're also looking at a balance between people that, want to move out there. They perhaps want, a larger a larger home or a larger piece of land for that home to be on. But you also have to consider they also want some of these amenities that you were describing, right?
Well, and I think too, you have to look at the housing crisis that we're in. And over the past 2 or 3 years, we've seen that huge escalation in prices. And a lot of young families, they're really having a challenge being able to afford a new home. You're seeing older adults who are moving out of their homes, who are having trouble finding something that they can afford. So all sorts of different circumstances where the rising house values have affected people. And it's why we're seeing more popularity of things like townhomes and apartments in our community. And I think going forward, you're going to see a lot of variety. You'll see singles, but you'll also see townhomes and you also see apartments, and trying to address all the different needs that families have as the community grows and continues to change.
Yeah, with that affordable housing, and not specific to your ward, but as I understand it too, you had just recently mentioned that there may be a bylaw to require affordable housing around transit. Is that coming? Is that something we can look forward to?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about home ownership mostly so far, but also thinking about people who really need affordable housing. We have a waiting list of over 10,000 people who are looking for affordable housing in the city. So we have a number of strategies underway to try to encourage more affordable housing to be built. One of those is something called inclusionary zoning, which would be a way to require a minimum percentage of affordable homes and apartments close to transit, and perhaps more broader than that. And we're also working on other bylaws to make sure, when there's redevelopment, when you have some older rental homes that are up for redevelopment to something newer, that you're protecting the tenants who live there and making sure that there's financial protection for them in the event that they may have to relocate. So these are all important things too, like recognizing the human aspect of the growth that we're seeing here in Ottawa. And I've been lucky just to have a good vantage point. I'm co-chair of the planning committee, so really good vantage point to listen from all sorts of different people in the community about how this growth in Ottawa is affecting them, and how the city can do better to help manage that growth and protect our families and communities here.
Yeah, and you have those candidate projects that are happening in Stittsville. You're hearing from the public, from your constituents, on how they feel, when it comes to the pedestrian candidate projects, the cycling candidate projects. Can you touch on those two things and what you've been hearing, and are you encouraged about those two particular projects?
Yeah, it's funny how the pandemic has changed or advanced a lot of our approach to all sorts of different things in the city. It was about a year ago, we went out to the community and we asked people to send in their feedback on suggestions on missing links in our sidewalk network and our pathway network. And I was just blown away by the response. We heard from dozens and dozens of people. I think we had close to 200 pieces of feedback. And it was part of a city's project to update our active transportation priority list. So it's looking at over the next few years, which of those sidewalks and pathways need to be built first, and what's the biggest priority. And the city's posted a short list, and people can go on to a website called engage.ottawa.ca and vote for the ones that mean the most, or that are the most important to them. And there's a lot of projects we've been hearing about a lot from the community. For example, improving the pedestrian safety through sidewalks on Hoban Street, also cycling safety on Stittsville Main Street. I think I might have mentioned that earlier. And then John Woods, making a safer pathway connection along John Woods. So all sorts of neighborhoods and good ideas for where we need to fix the connections. We want to make it easier for people to get out. whether they're on foot or on bike or on a scooter or on a skateboard or in a wheelchair, however they get around, making it safer and more convenient and easier to do that so that they can get to work, they can get to school, they can get out shopping or just for their own health. So really good project, and I hope residents can share their feedback with city staff so they hear loud and clear from Stittsville residents about what's important for the community out here.
You mentioned Main Street again, Glenn. I'd like to go back to Main Street for a moment. And what are residents telling you they want to see on Main Street? I mean, there needs to be a bit of a revitalization, of course, with, as you said, with all the, a lot of people moving into that particular ward. What are people telling you that's missing from Main Street in Stittsville?
Well, first and foremost, what we hear about is make it a safer street for cyclists and for pedestrians. The road was updated back in the 90s and really is in need of an upgrade right now. There are no bike lanes or segregated bike paths or anything along the whole stretch. The sidewalk in spots is narrower than what we'd be building today if we built a new sidewalk. And some of the crossing points, like at the Trans-Canada Trail, really need a safety improvement. So that's what we've been hearing. And then the other one is just people would like to see a more dynamic mix of shops and services. And we've seen some establish themselves. We saw Quitters about 5 years ago. We actually have 3 independent coffee shops there now. We've got Quitters, we've got Honey down at Bray Street, and very, very new is Ritual on Main, right at the corner of Stittsville, Main, and Abbott. We lost a few shops, so unfortunately, during the pandemic as well. It's tough to be a business owner right now. So we're looking at ways to work with the Stittsville Business Association and other partners just to make sure we've got a really healthy environment for small businesses, independent businesses to set up shop. I think that's really what we hear the most from people. Besides the safety, it's they'd love to see more independent restaurants and shops and services along the street. So that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, what are you hearing from businesses, Glenn? You just mentioned, you've unfortunately you've seen some businesses suffer closure because of the pandemic. What have you heard from businesses in your ward?
Well, as we're recording this today, it is the first day that the provincial restrictions are relaxing. So today I'm hearing a lot of relief and cautious optimism, but throughout I've just heard a lot of frustration. It's been very difficult to run a business, especially restaurants and gyms and anyone who's been affected by the closures that they've had to do. It's really hard to maintain staff, hire staff, try to navigate and make sure you are doing all the right things in terms of vaccine passports or capacity limits. It's been very, very difficult. I've also heard, an encouraging thing, which is they really do feel supported by the community. For restaurants, we know that people are going out and they're ordering takeout and trying to support and spend their dollar locally whenever possible. And it's so much appreciated. And, it has helped to keep businesses afloat, but it's going to be a long road to recovery for a lot of our local shops and services, and I really feel for them about what they've been through over the past couple of years. And of course, we hope that we're out of the worst of it. But I think there's that when I say there's that cautious optimism with a lot of the business owners I talk to, is that they're really not sure what to expect next. So we'll see what happens over the coming weeks and hope it's going in the right direction.
Yeah, and when it comes to the pandemic, of course, it's affected city revenues. Huge shortfalls because of the pandemic for many different reasons. You look at public transportation and the numbers going down, and the programs that the city puts on and losing revenue there, event spaces and fees that are paid for those sort of things. I think most people in Ottawa over the years have been happy with the property tax increase, remaining in that 2 to 3%. Another 3%, for this year. But as people I've spoken to, they wonder, because of these shortfalls and having to make up for the shortfalls, is it going to be inevitable that, down the road in 5 years and 7 years, are we going to see increases in the 5 to 10% range? Or are we putting off something, like I said, are we putting off the inevitable that these increases are going to have to come up? How do we make up for some of these shortfalls?
Well, I think we've been fortunate that the other levels of government, the provincial government and the federal government, have stepped up and helped with some emergency funding, particularly around transit. That was the city service that was the most affected by large-scale shortfalls. But I think one of the perhaps positive stories municipally is that the city has been able to balance its books without massively cutting back on things. We've had a real slow and steady approach to finances over the past few years, even before I was elected. And the benefit to that is that you won't see extremes from year to year. 3% is an increase, and I know that a lot of people in our community are struggling with that, but it is predictable. It is tied to inflation. The city has been hit very hard with rising construction costs for municipal infrastructure that we build. And we also have a large staff contingent that is necessary to deliver services. So we've taken a really prudent approach. And even with that 3% increase, we've been able to maintain services, but also invest in areas that are really important, like affordable housing. We've made some record investments in affordable housing this term, and continue to invest in important programs for residents.
Councillor Gower, you mentioned, the connectivity that many of your residents have talked about, connecting pedestrian and cycling and so forth. I also wonder, what are you hearing from them when it comes to transportation options currently available, the affordability of it, the reliability of it, the convenience of it? Certainly, you're in a different ward. Sometimes feel I'm sure that you're on the outside looking in when it comes to public transportation.
Yeah, it's been certainly different. And I think that the pandemic has forced us to rethink how we're doing transportation transit. Most cities are looking at this, and we're seeing different ridership patterns. I think we're not going to see as much ridership from the suburbs into downtown, but worth noting that if you look citywide, we are still seeing very, very strong ridership in the central parts of Ottawa. And I know that's hard for people in Stittsville to have that perspective, because many of our bus routes are only at a fraction of the capacity that we had pre-pandemic. But even if you only see 4 or 5 people on an express route to downtown, those people really need transit. Those are people who are going to hospitals, they are going to retail work. They don't have any other way of getting around, and it is an essential service. So it's something that we have to rethink. If we have less people who in the future will be taking rush hour routes from the suburbs to downtown, how do we redeploy those buses and those bus drivers to recognize where the need is? We actually did a thing last summer, just as an example of where we're seeing some of the strong ridership. We added bus service in Stittsville on Saturdays and Sundays on Route 62. The route never used to come into Stittsville, it used to end in Canada. And we did a survey, and we found that we had dozens of people who started taking that route. So if you have reliable transit that takes people to where they want to go when they need to go there, you will build that ridership. And I think that right now out in Stittsville and Canada, we're very much underserving a lot of the retail employees who work along places like Hazeldean Road or along Terry Fox or Eagleson. We could probably redirect a lot of service there. Also in some of the business park areas, like on Iber Road, or if you look at where we might have shift workers, like we know there's a lot of demand at the Granite Ridge Care Center, where we've got a lot of lower paid workers who are shift workers, looking at where we can provide better transit where we really need it the most. And I think that's a shift we're already seeing, and you're going to continue to see over the next year or so.
Yeah, and I think people fall into different habits too, right? One is going to be working from home. Many people want to continue doing that because they love the lifestyle and the work-life balance that they have. And you also have people that used to use public transit, and now they've gotten used to their car. The car is warmed up when they get in. They don't have to take a walk. Was this the right time to do a fare increase? I know that you have to keep paying bus drivers and fuel costs are going up, but I think some people question that. And should we be offering more incentives for people to go back to using public transit?
Well, going back to your earlier question about the overall city budget, the challenge is if you don't meet your increases due to inflation, like the cost of gas or the cost of your drivers, you might have to see a bigger bump in another year. I think there's some places where we could be doing more incentives on fares. For example, take weekends. If we're trying to attract more ridership on weekends, maybe there could be a fare discount there, or even evenings or holidays to get more people trying out the bus. I think we're going to need to a lot of encouragement for people to get back into that bus habit. I'm looking forward to getting back. I've been trying to take the bus and the train throughout the pandemic. When I'm going downtown, if I have that option, I'll take that. But I think it's going to be a lot to entice our riders back and get them back in the habit. Ultimately, though, go put aside fares and so on. What we really need to make sure is there's a reliable system, that the buses are showing up on time, that the buses are frequent, and that the train is reliable as well. And, I know we don't have to rehash it here, but there have been some significant and serious issues with the train over the past 6 or 8 months. And, it's been good since they relaunched in December, but, we really need to see month after month of consistent service to re-earn the trust of residents and get them back onto our transit system.
Yeah, I think everybody would agree with that sentiment for sure. We've at times, and I say at times because it's not always like this. In the media, this is our job to cover these things. But at times we've seen a very divided council. We're going to have some new faces around the table now. I believe we're up to probably 6 new faces we're going to see around the table, including a new mayor. What sort of leadership qualities do you think is necessary from not only the mayor as leader, but from city council in order to bridge some of this divide that's cropped up?
It's funny that the divide plays very well in the media sometimes, and plays very well in social media. When I talk to my colleagues, we actually have quite a lot in common, and on most things we get along very well. And there have been some issues and some incidents where we've really ratcheted it up. But I think for a new mayor to come in, being able to be a good listener and try to recognize where we do have common ground and start from there. I also think that someone coming in really needs to have a positive, constructive approach and show some vision where they'd like to take the city, but recognize that we actually do have a pretty good city to live in. When you look at, in the pandemic, yes, there have been difficulty for a lot of people, but we've really come together as a community to help each other out. We have one of the highest vaccination rates across all of Canada. As I mentioned before, people want to move here. We have a great economy, lots of jobs, a very high quality of life. So there's a lot of things to be proud about in the City of Ottawa. And I hope whoever is our new mayor will recognize those strengths and build on that and keep developing the partnerships and making sure that we're connecting and engaging and listening to everyone in our community.
Well, I think that's a great sentiment to wrap up our time today, Councillor Gower. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Well, and thank you, Derick, to you and the team at Rogers for setting these up. It's a great opportunity to catch up and chat about what's ahead for our community.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you so much. And, we really feel that's our job, right? As community television station, we're the voice of the community, and it's up to us to get out some of this information so that you can hear from your elected officials. And of course, it gives them an opportunity to hear from you after you hear about what they have to say about the issues that are most important to you. Thank you so much for watching. This has been another interview in our series of Dates 2022 right here on Rogers TV.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.
Call the Rogers TV viewer response line. Email us or connect with us on social media.
We're creating space for change.
Progress.
Equity. Reform.
This is a call out, a shout out, a reach out.
To help small businesses, charities, and organizations that support equity deserving groups.
Let's promote progress
by promoting your brand.
We're all in.
Dedicating our production resources and media platforms
to